Welcome back to my reading of The Hobbit. I'm Michael, and this is Roleplay Riot. We are on part 21, chapter 8, Flies and Spiders. They walked in single file. The entrance to the path was like sort of an arch leading into a gloomy tunnel made by two great trees that leant together, too old and strangled with ivy and hung with lichen to bear more than a few blackened leaves. The path itself was narrow and wound in and out of the trunks. Soon the light at the gate was so deep that their feet seemed to thump along, and the trees leaned over and listened. As their eyes became used to the dimness, they could see a little way to either side a sort of a darkened green glimmer. Occasionally, a slender beam of sun that had the luck to slip through some of the openings of the leaves far above, and still more luck in not being caught in the tangled boughs and matted twigs beneath, stabbed down thin and bright before them. But it was seldom, and it soon ceased altogether. There were black squirrels in the wood. As Bilbo's sharp and inquisitive eyes got used to seeing things, he could catch glimpses of them whisking off the pass and scuttling beneath tree trunks. There were queer noises, too, grunts, scufflings, and hurryings in the undergrowth, and among the leaves lay piled endlessly thick in places on the forest floor. But what made these noises, he could not see. The nastiest things that there were the cobwebs, dark, dense cobwebs, with threads extraordinarily thick, often stretched from tree to tree, or tangled in the lower branches on either side of them. There were none stretched across the path, but whether this was because of some magic keeping it clear, or for some other reason, they could not guess. It was not long now before they grew to hate the forest as heartily as they had hated the tunnels of the goblins, and it seemed to offer even less hope of ending. But they had to go on. Long after they were sick for a sight of sun and of sky, and longed for the feel of wind on their faces, there was no movement of air down under the forest roof, and it was everlastingly still and dark and stuffy. Even the dwarves felt it, who were used to tunneling and lived at times long without the light of the sun. But the hobbit, who liked holes to make a house in, but not to spend summer days in, felt like he was being slowly suffocated. The nights were the worst. It became pitch black. Not what you call pitch black, but really pitch. So black you could really see nothing. Bilbo tried flapping his hands in front of his nose, but he could not see it at all. Well, perhaps it is not true to say that they could see nothing. They could see eyes. They slept all closely huddled together and took turns to watch. But when it was Bilbo's turn, he could see gleams in the darkness round them, and sometimes pairs of yellow or red or green. Eyes would stare at them from a little distance, and would slowly fade and disappear, and slowly shine in and out again in another place. And sometimes they would gleam down from the branches just above them, and they were most terrifying. But the eyes that he liked the least were the horrible, pale, bulbous sort of eyes. Insect eyes, he thought, not animal eyes, only they are much too big. Although it was not yet very cold, they tried lighting watchfires at night, but they soon gave it up. It seemed to bring hundreds and hundreds of eyes all around them, and though the creatures, whatever they were careful never to let their bodies show in the little flicker of the flames, worse still, it brought thousands of dark, gray, and black moths, some nearly as big as your hand, flapping and whirring round their ears. They could not stand that, nor the huge bats, black as a top hat either. So they gave up fires and sat in the night and dozed in the enormous, uncanny darkness. All this went for what seemed to the hobbits ages upon ages, and they were always hungry, for they were extremely careful with their provisions. Even so, as the days followed days, and still the forest seemed to just the same, they began to get anxious. The food would not last forever. It was in fact already getting low. They tried shooting at the squirrels, but they wasted many arrows before they managed to bring one down in the path. But when they roasted it, it proved horrible to taste, and they shot no more squirrels. They were thirsty, too, for they had none too much water, and in all the time they had seen neither spring nor stream. This was their state when one day they found their path blocked by running water. It flowed fast and strong and not very wide right in front of the way, and it was black, or so it looked in the gloom, and it was well that Bjorn had warned them against it, or they would have drunk from it, whatever its color, and filled their emptied skins at the bank. As it was, they only thought how to cross it without wetting themselves in its water. There had been a bridge of wood across, but it had rotted and fallen, leaving only broken posts near the bank. Bilbo, kneeling on the brink, peered forward and cried, "There is a boat on the far bank. Now why couldn't it have been on this side?" "How far away do you think it is?" asked Thorin, for now they knew Bilbo had the sharpest eyes among them. "Oh, not far at all. I shouldn't think above 12 yards. 12 yards? I should have thought it was 30 at least, but my eyes don't see as well as they used to 100 years ago. Still, 12 yards is as good as a mile. We can't jump it, and we daren't try to wade or swim." "Can any of you throw a rope?" "What good is that? The boat is sure to be tied up, even if we could hook it, which I doubt." "I don't believe it's tied," said Bilbo, "though of course I can't be sure in this light, but it looks to me as if it's just drawn up on the bank, which is low and where the path goes down into the water." "Dori is strongest, but Fili is youngest and still has the best sight," said Thorin. "Come here, Fili, and see if you can see the boat Mr. Baggins is talking about." Fili thought he could. So when he had a long while to get an idea of the directions, the others brought him a rope. They had several with them, and on the end of the longest they fastened one of the large iron hooks they'd used for catching their packs to straps about their shoulders. Fili took it in hand and balanced it for a moment and then flung it across the stream. Splash! It fell in the water. "Not far enough," said Bilbo, peering forward. "A couple of feet and you would have dropped it on the boat. Try again. I don't suppose the magic is strong enough to hurt you if you just touch a bit of wet rope." Fili picked up the hook that he had drawn back rather doubtfully all the same. This time he threw it with greater strength. "Steady," said Bilbo. "You've thrown it right into the woods on the other side. Draw it back gently." Fili hauled the rope back slowly, and after a while Bilbo said, "Carefully! It's lying on the boat. Let's hope the hook will catch." It did. The rope went taut, and Fili pulled in vain. Keely came to help, and then Owen and Glowin. They tugged, and suddenly they all fell over on their backs. Bilbo was on the lookout, however, and caught the rope. With a piece of stick, fended off the little black boat as it came rushing down the stream. "Help!" he shouted, and Balin came just in time to seize the boat before it floated off down the current. "Well, it was tied after all," he said, looking at the snap painter that was dangling from it. "It was a good pull, my lads, and a good job that our rope was stronger." "Who will cross first?" asked Bilbo. "I shall," said Thorin, "and you will come with me, Fili and Balin. That's as many as the boat will hold at a time, and after that Keely and Owen and Glowin and Dori, then Ori and Nori and Biffer and Bofa, and last Dwalin and Bomba." "I'm always last, and I don't like it," said Bomba. "It's somebody else's turn today." "You should not be so fat. As you are, you must be with the last and lightest load. Don't go grumbling against orders, or something bad will happen to you." "There aren't any oars. How are you going to push the boat back from the far bank?" asked the hobbit. "Give me another length of rope and another hook," said Fili, and when they had got it ready, he cast it into the darkness ahead, as high as he could throw it. Since it did not fall down again, it must have gotten stuck in the branches. "Get it now," said Feely, "and one of you haul the rope that is stuck to the tree to the other side. One of the others must keep hold of the hook until we use first. Then when we are safe on the other side, we can hook it on, and you can draw the boat back." In this way, they were all soon on the bank, safe across the enchanted stream. Dwalin had just scrambled out with the coiled rope on his arm, and Bomber, still grumbling, was getting ready to follow, when something bad really did happen. There was a flying sound of hooves on the path ahead. Out of the gloom suddenly came a shape of a flying deer. It charged into the dwarves and bowled them over and gathered itself for a leap. High it sprang and cleared the water in one mighty jump. But it did not reach the other side in safety. Thorin was the only one who had kept his feet and his wits. As soon as they had landed, he bent his bow and fitted an arrow in case any hidden guardians of the boat appeared. Now he sent a swift and sure shot into the leaping beast. As it reached the further bank, it stumbled. The shadows swallowed it up, but they heard the sound of its hooves quickly falter and then go still. Before they could shout in praise of the shot, however, a dreadful wail from Bilbo put all the thoughts of venison out of their mind. "Bomber is fallen in! Bomber is drowning!" he cried. It was only too true. Bomber had one foot on the land when the heart had borne down on him and sprang over him. He had stumbled, thrusting the boat away from the bank, and it toppled back into the dark water, his hands slipping off the slimy roots at the edge, while the boat span slowly off and disappeared. They could still see his hood above the water when they ran to the bank. Quickly they flung a rope around with a hook towards him. His hand caught it, and they pulled him to the shore. He was drenched from hair to boots, and of course that was not the worst. When they laid him on the bank, he was already fast asleep, with one hand clutching the rope so tightly they could not get it from his grasp. And fast asleep he remained in spite of all they could do. There they were, still standing over him, cursing their ill luck and Bomber's clumsiness, and lamenting the loss of the boat, which made it impossible to go back and get the heart, when they became aware of the dim blowing of horns in the woods, and the sound of dogs baying far off. Then they all fell silent, and they sat, and it seemed they could hear a noise of a great hunt going by the north of the path, though there was no sign of it. And they sat for a long while and did not dare to make a move. Bomber slept on with a smile on his fat face, as if he no longer cared for all the troubles that vexed them. Suddenly on the path ahead there appeared some white deer, and hind and fawns as snowy white as the heart had been dark. They glimmered in the shadows. Before Thorin could cry out, three of the dwarves, but beyond it the path seemed to straggle on just as before, and in the forest they could see no change. Yet if they had known more about what they were considering the meaning of the hunt and the white deer that had appeared on their path, they would have known that they were at last drawing towards the eastern edge, and they would have come, if they had kept their courage up and hope, to thinner trees and places where the sunlight came through again. But they did not know this, and they were burdened with the heavy body of Bomber, which they had to carry along as best they could, taking the wearisome task in turns of 4 of each of them, while the others shared their packs. And if you want to find out what happens to them in the woods, we'll cover that in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching Role Play Riot.